Hi guys. Hey Catherine, Brittany. I see some
Hello.
faces here. Hello.
Bowie.
Maddie?
How are you? Yes,
Good,
this
how
is
are
me.
you?
I'm
Nice to
great.
see ya.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Where
Are
are you
you
these days?
in
What state are you
PA
in?
now?
Yeah, I'm in Pennsylvania.
Well, but I'm about to change. I'm about to move again, Oklahoma City. So we'll
Oh,
see.
fun.
Yeah.
All right. I'm so happy that there's connections in here, guys. Lindsay, how you feeling? You ready to drop some knowledge for us?
Oh yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah. You feeling it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If everybody is ready to go, and Lindsay, if you're ready to go, I'm gonna mute everybody. But Lindsay, talk to me really quick so we can paint a picture. You had told me it's going to be like 4 sections and we'll do Q&A in between.
Yep.
Do
So
you
I'm gonna go
prefer?
over.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna go over 4 main components of it, and then at the end I'll ask questions of each section, and then at the very end there should be time for some Q&A as well.
Okay, so can people type in the Q&A or do you want them to unmute? It doesn't matter. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Feel free to type in the chat, and then I'll probably pause it at a certain point. So if I'm talking and you think of a question, go ahead and type it in the chat, and then once we get to the end of the section, I'll go back and look to see what you guys are asking.
Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself. Just so you know, there's going to be people entering and just
Okay.
have fun.
Awesome. Okay. So let's go share screen. Wait, Kara, can
Yes, sorry.
there.
I'm going to give you the share
Okay.
screen
Okay.
option. Give me 1 second. Okay, you should have it now, Linz.
Okay. Share screen, desktop, share. Lovely. Okay, mastering your mind. Here we go. I am so excited to be speaking with you all today. And like we said, if you have questions at any point, just type it in the chat and I'll be stopping at the end of each section as we go. So first thing, who am I and why am I here? So, I put all this info in for you guys to know basically the standard information of my background and what I've done thus far. But, there's a lot that's missing here as far as the how and the actually why I am here and speaking about this topic. So, frankly, from a young age, my mentality has affected me significantly. I was always a perfectionist, always, since I was very young, and that also brought a lot of anxiety along with it. And, just as an example, so you can understand the gravity of my perfectionism and how young it started, I only cheated one time in my life, and it was in 2nd grade. And it was a science test, and I didn't want to not get a perfect score because I didn't know if the plural of leaves was FS or VES, and I tried to look in my notes to see. So, from to a certain point in time, my perfectionistic tendencies, it did push me forward and enabled me to succeed to an extent. As you can see, I ended up attending Stanford University. I majored in communications and ended up playing lacrosse there. But eventually, this perfectionism led to a lot of self-critical tendencies and was ultimately the cause of a lot of my struggles in college. If you've read my story, you'll know that my career reached as high as getting on the Twerton watch list, which for those field hockey coaches that are in here, the Twerton is basically the Heisman Trophy for lacrosse. And then my career went as low as, for the last game of my career, I ended up getting benched after being a 3-year starter. And that was simply because of the inconsistencies in my play due to my mental game. And honestly, now that I'm coaching, you know, and even before that, I really understood why that happened, as difficult as it was in the moment to deal with. And, um, you know, I got into coaching after college because I really am determined to make my story an anomaly. I don't want what happened to me to happen to any other athletes out there. And the mental game is just something that I continue to see, especially female athletes, struggle with. And it's just something that I'm very passionate about. And then as I was getting into coaching, I realized that simply sharing my story wasn't enough because I didn't have a strong background in the exact framework and theory that I needed to be able to explain, and some better practices to help kids through different stages they were at in the process, because obviously not everybody's story and journey is the same. So I really wanted to take the time to actually get certified and take some classes so that I really could do some good, and help some other people out there, and hopefully help you guys as coaches spread that knowledge to your players as well. And so what I did from there was I basically combined all of these certifications and my experiences into a curriculum that I have been teaching for the past 8 weeks almost now to the previous club program I was coaching with and directing in California. And since that time, I, again, because I want to get this to as many people as possible, I put all of that information into a workbook that is actually going live today. And at the end of this presentation, you will receive a link where you can go and get access to that. And it dives way further into the lessons and practical practices that anybody who has the ebook can work through, as well as providing space for daily reflections on each of the skills, so that as you move forward every day and every week, you're continuing to build and learn and improve your skill set of mastering your mind. So with that being said, I'm going to just dive right into here. So that, like I said from the beginning, there are 4 main components that go into mastering your mind, and that is commitment, challenge, confidence, and control. And these are the 4 areas that I'm going to dive into and talk about the practices that go along with them as well. So control is the first one I'm going to go over. It's defined here as the extent to which you feel control of your circumstances, thoughts, and emotions. Also, I want to point out that this is being recorded, so don't feel like you have to be scrambling to take notes. And I'm sure you've experienced this as players yourselves, maybe, or even you've experienced players that have had this experience of where they make mistakes and they really struggle to recover. They get frustrated learning a new skill, or even just handling coaches yelling at them, and they let these emotions get the best of them, and they a lot of times get so wrapped up in the negative spiral that they don't even hear the instructions that they're given to actually make the future skills and decisions better. And so how are we going to practice this? And the big skill for this is mindfulness. And I'm sure you've heard about mindfulness, but mindfulness is a skill that can absolutely be practiced and taught. And it's your ability to stay present and focused on what's going in the moment. And as I wrote here, meditation can help with this. It's something that I have added on to this practice because some people get very intimidated by meditation. It also can look very different for different people. I personally love it, and I use the Calm app, and there are other ones as well. But the most practical way that you can practice coming back to the present moment is through utilizing pause moments. And a pause moment is simply one round of a breathing exercise, and it's triggered throughout the day as many times as you can. So what my advice is and has been to kids is to pick something that they do around 4 to 5 times per day. So for me, it's really easy to do that washing hands, using the bathroom. Again, something especially during this time we're doing very frequently. It can be, I've seen some kids use when they get to the top of their staircase, others when they walk through a door. So it can really be anything you want it to be. But what's important is that once you go through that trigger, you then go through one full series of breathing. And there are 2 different techniques you can use. My personal favorite is called square breathing. And what that looks like is you close your eyes, and this is for both techniques. You always want to close your eyes. And then you visualize a square. And that's why I like this one, is because it's more visual. So, and you connect your breathing to it. So if I'm closing my eyes, I'm imagining a square right now. I'm going to breathe in for 4 seconds while I'm making one side of the square. I'm going to hold it for 4 seconds while it's coming across. I'm going to breathe out for 4 seconds, and then I'm going to hold it across. And you do that once, and then you just keep going throughout your day. And again, it's to develop the habit of pausing, so that when they're in a difficult situation, they're more easily able to utilize this skill. The other technique is 3-4-5 breathing, and that simply is you breathe in, counting for 3 seconds. So 1, 2, 3, obviously slower than that. Hold it for 4 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then breathe out for 5 seconds. So that is the pause moment, and that's the first part of control. The second part of control is what happens if the pause moments don't work, or what do you do after the pause moments? And this is where you're going to want to utilize positive self-talk. And this is also where I talk about the yellow mentality that we want to develop. I actually heard about 2 years ago, Lindsay Hamilton speak. She is a mental performance coach with IMG Academy, and she brought to my attention the stoplight analogy for our mental game. And ever since I heard it, it's something that I've used when I've been speaking about this, because if you think about your mentality like a stoplight, so green is super positive, yellow is neutral, and red is super negative. A lot of athletes think that they have to be in the green to perform at their best, when in reality, they're best served, and it's more common that athletes are actually in the yellow zone. So it's really about understanding too that they can have the red thoughts, but they're still really trying to push towards that yellow zone, because that's going to be where they're ultimately performing at their best. And some of the keys for self-talk are to make it short, make it positive. And interestingly, I recently learned too, through a book I was reading about emotions, that it's a lot more beneficial to use third person when you're talking to yourself. So instead of saying you use you or Lindsay. So for me, my go-to, and this is again one of my suggestions, is to have a go-to phrase is, Lindsay, you can do hard things. I didn't come up with that. That's Glennon Doyle's, by the way. If anybody hasn't read Untamed, I highly recommend it. It's a fantastic book. So I will say to myself, Lindsay, you can do hard things. Using my name and you makes me feel it a lot more, research shows, than if you just say I. So that's a really interesting tidbit with that. So that is the end of the first part. I'm going to check in to see if there are any questions, but I don't know why my cursor is not coming up here. I don't know why I can't see it. Sarah,
Lindsay,
do you see any?
I think you have to unshare your screen. I'm not 100% sure. We don't have any questions in the chat box at the moment, but I actually do have a question.
Sure.
I know that you said about I've never heard of the stoplight mentality. That's really awesome. And you said that our athletes tend to stay in the yellow more. As a coach, I mean, are we allowing them to stay in the yellow? Is it okay for, like, how do we coach that?
So the yellow is the target.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so you want to be neutral. And that's a lot of the misconception, is that you have to be super positive all the time. And
Okay.
really it's about achieving a state of neutrality, which is what control is all about.
Okay.
It's not that yellow is, oh my gosh, I'm confusing my colors. Green is not a bad thing to be super positive, by any stretch of the imagination. But I think too many times athletes get wrapped up in thinking that they have to be in the green to play at their best, when if they can simply achieve a neutral mentality, that will equally, and sometimes even more so, benefit them. Because if you're too positive, you might get too wrapped up or only see the good stuff that's going on and not be able to see what you need to improve, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And I'm having like a moment as a coach, because I do also feel like I push that positivity so much. So thank you. This is
Mhm.
really cool.
Yeah, and we're going to go on in a later section, but a lot of that too is going to be for them being able to gain awareness of those situations and circumstances and feelings, um, that come up when they both are way spiraled out of control, and also when they actually start to spiral. So don't worry, we'll get there on what you can do and how you can advise them and to help your athletes once they do start to kind of go towards that red zone. Anything else?
That's it from me. I see nothing in the chat at the moment. Thanks, Linz.
Okay, cool. All right, so moving on, confidence. So confidence, and I'll try not to get on my soapbox too much about this, but confidence is incredibly difficult for girls and frankly women in this country, just because of the standards that are set for us, both through media, social media. Even marketers, ads, all those things contribute to and define what and who and how we are supposed to be, act, everything. And so it can be incredibly difficult. But the most important thing that you can continue to stress to your athletes is that confidence can be learned. It is, while it can be, something that some people maybe naturally possess, it doesn't have to be. So I think that's the most important thing. And again, a really big misconception, when girls think about confidence. They think that some girls just have it or not, and don't understand that it can be learned. And I'm going to go through the context and practices that they can go through to work on it. So what exactly is confidence? It really simply is an internal belief in your value and your abilities. And it's broken up into three components: self-worth, self-esteem, and self-efficacy. And in this first part, I'm going to be talking about self-worth versus self-esteem, because understanding how these two are related is incredibly important. Self-worth is the belief or value that you believe you have in simply being yourself without any kind of attachment whatsoever. It is really more of an internal value. And that's kind of, again, a little bit difficult for people to get their heads around. And how it differs from self-esteem is that self-esteem is the value you believe you hold based on the external world, or how the external world perceives you. So you can have self-esteem but lack self-worth. But it's incredibly difficult to have self-worth and not have self-esteem. So for this part, I'm really targeting the self-worth self-worth piece. And for you coaches, that's really what you want to target as well. For instance, through a real life example, how this can work out is that for me personally, with my mindset, this was the crux of my problems. I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies because my self-esteem became what defined my self-worth. So, generally, I did have a pretty high self-esteem. I was at one of the best universities in the country playing at a top 15 program. However, when those things started to become in question, I got a bad grade or I didn't have a good game, it took me an incredibly long time to come back from those instances. And it's why it was really difficult for me to rebound from bad games, even within game or soon after. And so that's why, again, we really want to make sure we're targeting the self-worth piece. And so how are we going to do that? The main practice that I have is mirror mantras, and it's going to sound hokey and feel weird, but in order to believe that you have worth, you have to say it and own it and get comfortable with that fact. So what a mirror mantra is, the practice is that you write, "You are worthy being you," on a little Post-it. You put it on your mirror, and the girls say this while they're brushing their teeth in the morning and in the evening. And through that repetition and reflection, it is my hope that they will start to realize and own that worth in themselves. Another way you can practice this is through self-compassion. And self-compassion is pretty much what you're thinking, is having compassion for yourself. And a lot of times it's a little bit difficult for us to do that. We're very quick to do that for our friends, but when it comes to ourselves, it's a little, like I said, it's a little more difficult. So the practice of self-compassion is used when you have longer periods of spiraling. Usually this happens later in the evening. I just find generally for athletes and for myself personally, that's when the head starts spinning and you have a lot more time to process things. And the practice is a little bit more unstructured, but what the notion of it is essentially talking to yourself as if your best friend was sitting next to you and telling you every response to your thoughts. And again, it sounds weird, but I've done this myself. And when I start spiraling, I imagine my best friend, because we all know our best friends inside and out, and you know exactly what they would say to you and how they would respond to a given situation. And imagining that they are telling you this really enables you to recover and get back to that yellow zone. The next part of this is self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is your belief in your ability to accomplish a task, a skill, or even to handle a situation. And what lacking self-efficacy can look like is giving up when things get hard or challenges come up, not even trying at something because you think you're going to fail, or even the full extent of completely visualizing that you're going to fail at the task. For me personally, this played out as well throughout my college career, even as early as high school. In high school, I honestly did not even look at any Ivy League schools or Stanford when I was first looking, because I didn't think that's what I was capable of, despite being in the top 20% of my class and being a good lacrosse player and having good SAT scores. I just did not think I was capable of that. Also, one of my biggest regrets in college is not taking a public speaking course, which as a coach and being a speaker now is something that would have been very valuable to me. But it's something that I always perceived myself as not being good at. and being incredibly scared to fail at and thinking that I would. So I just didn't want to do it. And obviously, as you all know, if you're not failing, you're not improving. So it's really important to help athletes own the skill, because the more risks and they take, the more lessons they can learn, the better they will be able to get. All the previous tools I have discussed with the pause moments, the positive self-talk, self-compassion, and the mirror mantras will help with self-efficacy. But the added skill that I add with this part is visualization. And visualization doesn't have to be an incredibly time-consuming thing. It can be as little as 5 minutes before a practice or a game. But the most important part of visualization is that you're really seeing the details and feeling everything. So really encompassing all the senses that you have, and not just seeing the picture of yourself and the situation playing itself out, but actually putting yourself in the situation as if you are there and really feeling that. And hearing all of it, what you smell, as much detail as you possibly can. It's also important when you're doing visualization not to just go and jump into it. Really take some time, go through 1 to 2 pause moments to really set the scene, get yourself relaxed before you go into that visualization of how you want the situation to play out. Another thing that you can do with the visualization is actually visualize the potential obstacles that might come up and then how you would attack them, which I think is really powerful. Whether it's, a really tough opponent you're going to face, or a really difficult skill that your athletes have been working on. So that is the end of part 2. Are there more questions that have popped up? I can't click here.
Lindsay, I have a question.
Sure
So
thing.
in the chat, I mentioned that I think that for me as a coach, teaching self-compassion and grace to athletes is so tough because, we're raised buying into this team mentality, and we get to a point where we think that giving ourselves that grace can be selfish. So what would you say is the best way to go about helping your athletes wrap their minds around the fact that giving yourself grace and giving yourself that compassion is not selfish, but it's actually helping out the team and the goal of the whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually provided, and I can send this out, but I think it's just self-compassion.org. Kristen Neff, Dr. Kristen Neff, is one of the biggest researchers in self-compassion, and she has a ton of research articles on the website, and I actually picked one specifically because of this notion that I put in the workbook. And again, I can send you guys that link to that specific one. But I think showing athletes the research to understand that they can actually see that working on self-compassion actually can help your performance and can help your team. And this one in particular does bring up the notion from athletes that, it can lead to complacency or some passivity, which I think is also some negative connotations about it. But again, self-compassion, and this is something that you can reiterate as well, is more so about allowing you to gain more clarity into the situation. So, realizing that, seeing the skills that you need to improve on without being self-critical. So again, it's trying to just get rid of the judgment that we feel about ourselves, either not performing well or making mistakes, and instead trying to focus on what actually is going wrong so that we can stop getting mad and shaming and blaming ourselves and move forward to what we need to do to actually improve. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Is there any other questions? All right, I'm going to take that pause as a no. Okay. So the next part, this is part 3, is commitment. I think most of you know what commitment is, how likely you are to sticking to a course of action. And commitment really comes down to the choices that we make. And my job through this part is to help the athletes see, you know, why are they making these hard choices? So the steps that they need to take to determine, you know, what the purpose of these choices are. And then secondly is to create systems to make these hard choices much easier. And to start, you have to make these hard choices. You have to know what you're making them for and why. So personally, for me, you know, when I was in high school, it was always my goal to be a Division I lacrosse player. Literally, since I was 5 years old, I will never forget a lacrosse player from the University of Maryland came to my team and spoke with us. And I remember sitting there and being like, I want to be just like her. And it has been embedded in me since I was 5. And so I knew that that was my goal. And I always wanted to be a part of that. You know, her talking about her team and how exciting and fulfilled she felt doing that, and how great it felt to play lacrosse at that level. And knowing that that was my goal and knowing why I wanted to get there really helped me make difficult choices when, you know, I had to miss out on some social outings, or I wasn't always up to tabs on, you know, the latest TV shows or episodes that had come out. And, you know, it's not to say either that I missed out on all of those things. I just had to make choices that I didn't go to all of them. And, you know, that's again going to be something that's going to be really important as with this practice. For this skill is goal setting. And for some of your athletes, this might be the most important thing that they do, because a lot of times this lack of commitment that you might be experiencing or they might be experiencing is because they don't know why they want something. They might have a goal, but they don't know why it's there. And if you don't know why you want something, or if you don't even know what your goal is, you're much less likely to commit to it. And it's going to make those choices much harder than they have to be. And I think it will explain a lot of the behaviors and choices as we move into the second part. They'll be able to gain clarity around that. The second part of this is a vision board. And you can do this in the traditional sense. Basically, a vision board is something that helps you elicit some inspiration, motivation. It sets your mood and reminds you of your goals. And why I like this is because, again, it takes what you write down, your goals of knowing what and why you're doing it, and creates a more visual representation. And ideally, you put this somewhere you will see every single day. So for me, I made it really easy for myself because I'm not super creative, artsy, but there is a website called canva.com. That's canva.com. And they have templates for you to make a desktop wallpaper, and you can upload images to it. And I have set it as my desktop wallpaper. So it's something that I see every single day. I have images, I have quotes on there, and just generally bright colors that make me happy and excited, because the more, again, that you can set your mindset from the get-go, and I'm actually going to talk about this in the next section, the easier, again, those choices become. And the last thing that we want to get in the habit of is accomplishing daily tasks towards goals. So starting to pick 2 goals that kids want to accomplish every single day that push them towards their bigger goal is going to help create a foundation for them to develop more habits and routines that will, again, continue to push them forward. And again, really embody and get them in the habit of having daily tasks and working on their goals on a daily basis. So part 2, once we have our what and our why, the part 2 is really building on these systems that make these choices and therefore the commitment easier. So one, as I alluded to, was habits and routines. Ideally, you'd want this to be morning and night. This creates a positive outlook, motivation, and allows an opportunity for reflection as well. I would say the morning is the most crucial. And again, these habits and routines are really so that we make these choices easier, because we actually spend a lot of mental energy decision making on a daily basis. And they already have so much going on that they have to give their energy to. I mean, we do as humans on a daily basis. I'm sure you guys know. But if we can make, again, this easier by making something a habit or a routine, then that's going to alleviate some of those choices. Then they can actually put that energy towards maybe the more difficult ones that come up later on. And again, with habits and routines, you always want to start small. So for somebody that doesn't have any kind of habit or routine, I would really just start with a morning routine. And again, really small. I would say pick 3 things that they can do. And a misconception about habits and routines is that it has to be the same every single day. Although we do want that, if they can pick 3 that they can stick to and really tweak and make their own, that's what's important, is that all those tasks get done. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a certain order for it to be effective. And also, you want to try to make this as personal as possible. I think people try to do too much with their habits or routines, or they do habits and routines that work for other people. And what works for somebody else might not be what works for you. So maybe you feel ready making your bed in the morning and somebody else doesn't. And that's totally okay. I think that's just one thing that gets thrown around a lot, that you have to make your bed. While it's true, yes, I absolutely love to do that. It does make me feel accomplished. Somebody else, it might not have the same effect. So I think that's important to keep in mind as well when you're talking to your athletes about this. The next piece is time management. And this is probably one of the most important pieces of this commitment system here. And what the skill or practice is going to be is to create a 168 plan. I actually have an image on the next slide that's going to show an example of what mine looks like. And this is something that I do personally on a weekly basis. The athletes themselves don't have to do this every single week. I personally just do this to keep myself organized and make sure that I'm continuing to work towards my goals and do what I need to do. But what it really does, even if they do it one time, is to help them gain clarity about what they're actually doing and how they're spending their time. So how you start out making this is you put all of your necessary commitments in first. So that's all the practices, school, all that time. Then you go to the extra stuff, when you're sleeping, eating, wake time. Then you put in the extras. So this is when your study time is, when you're gonna hang out with your friends. Yes, absolutely put this in the plan, because even the downtime, however that looks for them or whatever they want it to look like, put it in, schedule it, and so that can be their plan. So obviously the first step would be to write out what those commitments are, so that they can actually see where their empty free time is. And then once they do that, then they can start putting in when they want to maybe add an extra training session, where normally maybe during that time they would have been watching Netflix, for example. The last piece is external support. And this is also an incredibly important system in the piece of commitment. And what's also important to know is that external support is going to look different depending on the source, and athletes need to think about what they want that to look like. So I suggest that athletes pick 3 people that they want to rely on for external support, and actually reach out to those people to ask them if they can support them, but then think about specifically how these people can best support them. again, if you are asking for support, but that person doesn't know how to best support you or how you want support, then it's going to be really challenging for that person to help you on your path. And I say that and emphasize the kind of support because for me, my support that I got from my teammates looked different depending on the teammate. So for instance, when I was in high school, I had two best friends that were attackers, and I needed them to give me the traditional sense of support. When you think about the word, unconditional, always there. But I also needed them to support me in the form of accountability. And I needed them to say when I didn't want to go shoot, hey, let's go shoot, and remind me of my goals to go play Division I lacrosse and that we needed to go practice to get better. Whereas, maybe a defender, I really just needed them to support me if I was experiencing a low point, or I needed them to go bring me to work out. Again, different contexts and situations. Same thing goes with my parents. I needed them to both hold me accountable when I didn't want to, which did include my mom telling me that I need to get off my butt and watch TV and go for a run. But then I did also need real support after games. One of the greatest things that my parents ever did for me was that they always waited for me to speak to them about the game itself. They never brought it up. They would always wait for me after a game. They greeted me with a hug. And that was kind of our practice, was that I would talk to them when I was ready to talk about the game, especially those bad ones. Obviously the good ones, you can't wait to talk about it, so it comes out naturally. But for when I needed to process a little bit more, I told them, and they were really great about waiting for me to speak about it, to engage in conversation. The last thing is from a coach. All right. From a coaching perspective, from my goalie coach, I needed to know how I can rebound from bad performances. I needed to know how I can get better in the exact skills I needed to get better. And I needed somebody to watch me play to see how I could get there. So again, those are really straightforward ways of how people can support you so that you're getting what you need, instead of just generally asking for people to help you without them fully knowing how best to do that for you. Because again, everybody is so different in their needs and what motivates them. So that could be very different for you. So this, I'm sure probably very overwhelming right now, is my personal 168 plan. So this was a week of my life in California. I put, there's driving time in there. There's time allotted for weekly reflections, lunch breaks, dinners, the practices themselves, my personal training sessions, my morning routines. It's important to keep in mind too that this looks very structured, and although I would like to sit here and say that my days looked exactly like this all the time, they definitely tended to change. But giving me this framework made it much easier for me to accomplish what I needed to do and give me a framework for what I wanted out of the day. And again, it just took a lot of decision making out of the question, because I knew exactly what I needed to do, what my schedule looked like, and the time frame I had to get there. So if I only had a couple hours to work, then I knew I really had to push it. And having these time slots really allowed me to do that. So there were some times where if I had a really big time slot, for instance, like a Wednesday to get some work done, I would actually put in specific things that I wanted to work on that day. So it's really up to you how, and the athletes, how they want to break this down. It doesn't have to be in Google Calendar. This is what I use to do this. You can write it down. Right now, that's my phase. I kind of go back and forth between the two. For me right now, it's just easier to write it out, which you certainly can do. And it doesn't have to be the structured either. Whatever format works for them, to just make sure that they can visualize what their weeks look like. That's going to be really important for them to see, okay, really how much open time that they have that they're not maximizing right now. And that's the most important thing, so that they can dedicate more time to the goals that they actually want to accomplish. Does anyone have any questions here? That is the end of our commitment section.
Lindsay, it's Kara.
Yes.
I love the 1-6-8 plan. Even if I don't have my team do it all the time, just as a little
Yes.
exercise is really cool, because
Absolutely.
I think that time management's always hard for the student athletes. We have 2 questions for you, so I'm going to read them off. Is that
Yep.
okay?
Absolutely.
The first one is from Audrey, and she asked, as a coach, do you share with your team your goals for the team, or do you just let the girls work on their own goals?
So I think for the most part, I mean, when I made this, I was thinking about personal individual goals, but as a coach, when you're working with a team, I think it's great to facilitate a discussion about it, and so that they're contributing to it. I would, if there's a goal that, they're not talking about, I definitely I would feel free as a coach to just say, well, what do you guys think about this? And framing it in that context, because you certainly don't want to say, like, this is my goal for you right now, and put that on them, because if it's not a goal that they want and can get behind, that commitment piece is going to be challenging. So I think more facilitating it into a discussion and, asking, like, hey, what do you guys think about this? Can we get behind this? And if the answer is yes, then you have your answer. If not, then maybe it needs to be tweaked or adjusted to fit what they want to accomplish, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Linz. I'll let you know if there's any feedback or anything. And anybody, you guys can unmute too. But we have one more question, and I'm curious as well. Brittany wants to know why it's called the 1-6-8 plan.
Because there are 168 hours in a week.
Oh, all right.
Yes.
I love that. Cool.
Sorry, I should have said that. My bad. Okay. Jumping in because we're running out of time here. I want to make sure. Oh,
I'm gonna cut you. We have one quick question coming in.
Okay.
Do you have any extra advice for working with or managing goalies? I found that their mental game is huge, as you know, Lindsay. Whether it is if they get the start or not, or if they keep letting in a specific shot. I am not a keeper. I rely a lot on my goalkeeper friends to help me out in situations.
Yeah, so I think the best thing is to really ask your goalies how they feel supported. Again, this is where it comes down to individuals. I know that nothing helps a goalie feel like they're okay and can continue to perform well than knowing that their coach believes in them. And this is something that I relied on strongly, and it always just enabled me to keep going forward, knowing that my coach believed in me. So as positive as you can be, especially in a game situation, from a goalie's perspective, you're not going to make a lot of changes in a game. But, so it's really important to keep their energy and keep their mind going, because, I mean, especially in that position, the mindset's everything. So if they can stay up, it's more likely that they'll be making saves. Practice time, now that's a little bit different. That's obviously where you want to be, and you have the time and room to be more critical and tell them, exactly what they need to do to improve their skill set. You can do that in a game. That's not to say you can't do that, but, especially when they're already down, keeping it light and making sure that you keep saying that you believe in them, and they can do it. All of these positive things will certainly help.
Thanks, Lindsay.
All good? Yeah. All right. So the last section here, but this is kind of maybe one of the hardest parts, but it's really something that combines everything we've gone over thus far. So challenge is the perception of how you see challenges that are in front of you in general, and then the actual challenge that is mastering your mind. And it's really important to understand that this is a process of mastering your mind. It's not something that you just do or learn and then you know it and you're good. It's constantly evolving, and that's something that I will definitely be reiterating as we go. But something that can help is, as we were talking about in the very beginning, is gaining awareness of the feelings, thoughts, and behaviors that you have when your mind really starts to spiral out of control. So a situation or a practice rather that I have athletes engage in is related to the colors in the stoplight. So I'll have a chart laid out where they go through think through their self-talk, their feelings, their body language, situations explicitly, and really any other factors that you can think of that may influence their mental game that come up when they're in the yellow, when they're neutral. So really thinking through that. How are they talking to themselves? How are they feeling? What does their body language look like? What do those situations look like? And then I added in there an orange section. So orange to me is when things start spiraling, when you start to question, when maybe some negative thoughts start creeping in, maybe you notice some body language changes. And then the last piece is the red, when they're totally out of control. What does their self-talk look like? What are their feelings? What does the body language look like? What do those situations look like? And the purpose of this is to one, like I said, increase their awareness so that they can develop an exact plan of attack of what skills they want to use and when they want to use them. So whether it's a situation comes up and they know they want to use pause moments for that, or maybe a certain situation, they know that the pause moments aren't enough and they need that external support to really push them to where they want to go. This developing of that plan is going to be crucial to utilizing these skills moving forward into their life. And the second part of challenge is, once you create that plan of attack, you have to constantly be reviewing and evaluating your approach and how the situation ends up unfolding so that you can continue to get better at practicing these skills. Because these skills are a practice. They have to be a practice. That is one of the biggest hurdles that also got me, was that I was actually taught some of these skills when I was in college, but I would try them for maybe 3 days and just say, this isn't for me. I'm not good at this. And I mean, that whole approach is not good to begin with, but really understand that this is going to be a continuing, evolving process. And what I've laid out is for athletes to also go through daily reflections so that they're finding how they can improve their responses to these situations and how they can improve their utilization of these skills. But also it's important to find the wins in each day. Just as a general rule of thumb, the more positive you are feeling, the more likely you're going to keep going with these behaviors and build momentum moving forward. And then the final thing, and something that's really important, is to overall then go back and look at what went well and what situations caused you problems as a whole, so that you can maybe set some micro goals for yourself and see where you can change and continue to evolve throughout the next week or for the rest of your life. Personally, I've done this, and naturally, I'm a night owl. I tend to stay up very late. And however, after doing this and reflecting and noticing all the wins that I had, I noticed that I was way more productive and I felt better when I actually worked out early in the morning and got up, and then I would do my work. So what I had to do then was that I had to change slowly, because it's a process, my habits, routines, behaviors, so that I would make my mindset easier in that way. And I could really change what I'm doing to, again, best serve myself to achieve the goals. So that's where it's really things become a little bit more personal and individual, because there are some people that just are really productive at night, and that's totally okay too. A lot of people have, this conception that morning is always best, and that's not the case for everyone. It was for me, especially after a workout, but it doesn't have to be for everyone. So that's the end of part 2. Some final thoughts, and then we'll do some Q&A. Is that, like I said, mastering your mind takes time. It is a continuous process of trial, error, and growth. Another important thing, and this is something that I emphasize with a lot of athletes as well, is that outside factors such as sleep, hydration, and nutrition really impact your ability to effectively use these strategies, and also affect your ability to and perception of the choices that athletes ultimately want to make. For me personally, sleep is a huge factor, not only for my mental health, but really for my mindset in general and ability to make the choices that I want to move forward. But the biggest thing is to understand that if your athletes are willing to put in the work and have the patience to work through it all, then improvements absolutely are going to happen. And this is something that I'm seeing continuously throughout my life. I'm continually evolving what tools work for me in what situations, and tweaking my habits and behaviors so that ultimately I achieve what I want to. So with that being said, that's all I have. If anybody has any questions, now I'll take some questions to wrap things up. I put a link here for my workbook that I've created. So the workbook is all of these lessons laid out through a period of 8 weeks. And after each part that I've gone through, it will have a part for daily reflections and ask daily reflection questions so that athletes can continue to evolve their own practice as they move through, as well as a lot more information about my journey, and these practices and the framework and theory around them as well. I also, in case you didn't see it on the first page, I am a personal trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, certified nutrition coach. And so knowing that these things carry a lot of weight with performance, I created a Patreon membership page where I write 4 posts a day detailing some sort of topic in relation to personal growth. So a lot of that is just general thinking about the world, society. I've written a lot recently on Black Lives Matter, and what I'm reading with the new Jim Crow. So it's really not just about personal growth, in the sense of, making yourself better, but also growing in your thinking and ideas. And then mindset is another topic. Another one is nutrition, and then training. So if you're interested in that, you can definitely head there and check out what that's all about. And then the last thing is my Instagram pages. Coach Lindsay M is my personal training, coaching. And then LM Lax training is really lacrosse goalie specific training. There's some mindset development there as well, but I would love to connect with you guys on any and all platforms. I also have a YouTube page for the lacrosse coaches out there as well. And then my website has a ton more information too that you can find, with blogs and just a ton more content at lmlaxtraining.com. But I do want to say thank you so much for coming and listening to this. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. And like I said, I can't reiterate that enough that I would love to connect with you guys. If you have questions at any point in time, face certain situations, feel free to reach out. I can also share my email, which is just lmlaxtraining@gmail.com. Are there any final questions before we wrap it up?
Hi, Linz. It's Kara. I actually do have a question.
Yep.
I'm just thinking about doing this with my youth girls, and I just wanted to hear your perspective on, the difference between doing it with like an elite coach and with a youth coach, or I'm sorry, with an elite team and with a youth team. Obviously, we're not going as intense. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think if you're working with younger athletes, you can still do this, but I think to maybe a lesser extent. For instance, do they need a fully laid out 168 plan? Probably not. I think that's
Yeah.
more catered to the high school athlete. However, you can certainly maybe come up with time slots or areas, hey, this is our morning time slot, this is our afternoon, evening, and kind of work it through like that with them. Something like mirror mantras is super simple and easy. Same thing with the self-talk and the pause moments. Again, I think those are very easy to implement. I think just gauging where the kids are at from a maturity perspective,
Yeah.
but also keeping it super simple. So if this is something you wanted to work through with them, really taking it week by week and only giving them one skill at a time is really crucial, because a lot of times with the mental skill set piece, people try to do too much at once and end up setting themselves up for failure, not realizing that you really have to take the time to actually practice these things and put them into certain situations and really understand the application and what strategies are going to work best for you given each situation that comes up.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
All right, I'm not seeing anything else, but that's all I got.
Thank you so much. I took a ton of notes.
Awesome.
Love it. I appreciate it, Lindsay. Thanks for coming in to everybody. If anybody
Yeah.
has any questions, like Lindsay said, email her, Instagram, Facebook, email us, email Maddie. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for doing this. It was really awesome.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lynn.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.